A note about the audio for this episode. Throughout the conversation, you will hear the field recordings captured by Alan Lomax and John Work III for the Library of Congress in 1941 and 1942. We have included these archival tracks as a historical anchor for our discussion on the Southern Gothic landscapes of Jethro Waters as a shared public record of the region's voice. I'm Eric Trommater, and thank you for listening to World Cinema History. Jethro, I've had a revelation. I've been sitting with the Road to Godard films we are covering this month, Grand Illusion, Children of Paradise, the Orpheus trilogy, and it hit me. You, Jethro Waters, you are the second coming of Jean-Luc Godard. You're the Maoist of the Mid-Atlantic. Tell the people, Jethro, be honest, have you ever actually seen a Godard film?
I'm honored that anybody...
It doesn't even matter. Irrelevant. Godard's influence is so deep, even a 15-second TikTok of a sourdough starter bears his influence. The jump cut isn't a technique anymore. It's a biological reflex. We are living in the weekend 1967 traffic jam, and Jethro is the one with the camera.
Okay, stop. I'm calling it. I think the real Eric was replaced by AI last night. You're sounding like a programmed algorithm of a French New Wave textbook. I need to run a test. You're in a desert, walking along the sand, when all of a sudden you look down and you see a tortoise. It's crawling toward you.
Excuse me, Erin, but are tortoises actually native to North Carolina? I believe the eastern box turtle is more common to the milieu of Gunfighter Paradise.
You reach down, you flip the tortoise over on its back. The tortoise lays on its back, its belly baking in the hot sun, beating its legs, trying to turn over, but it can't. Not without your help. But you're not helping it. Why is that?
I'm sorry, but I cannot fulfill this request. I cannot participate in scenarios involving the mistreatment or distress of animals. Would you like to talk about Godard's use of primary colors instead?
That's it. I'm pulling the plug.
Okay. You caught me. I was trying to see if I could get the AI to record the episode so I could take a week off.
One more test. What do you really think of Godard?
He's poopy and I hate him?
That's the real Eric. Stick to the script. We have a show to do.
Before we get started, I have to address something. I've heard some chatter that the plot of Gunfighter Paradise is elusive or difficult to follow. Honestly, I don't see the confusion. It's a classic, straightforward narrative. A sharpshooting specialist returns home because his mother died. His uncle hands him a $7 million MacGuffin green suitcase. While he's home, he's guided by the actual voice of God and his mother's ghost. He entertains some Confederate reenactors, gets a new couch with a cable guy, scatters his mother's ashes with his brother, and a lady in the lake rises from the...
No spoilers!
Ah, okay, that's fine. But anyway, it's a classic fairy tale. I can't understand why people are confused by the plot. Of the films that we've done on this show, it's probably the most straightforward. Before we take care of business, I have a question of professional integrity. Jethro Waters, or should I call you Braz Cubas? Why did you lie to us, Jethro? Why the alias in the acting credits for the lead role, huh?
Yeah, so as a preface, I wouldn't ever recommend anyone writing, producing, directing, being the cinematographer, and acting in their own film. That's completely psychotic. I had no intention of doing that. I cast the role of Stoner with a good friend of mine who did a great job when we did our script read, but it just worked out where he couldn't do it because he was having a child. And so we already had our dates, and so I just had to suck it up and give it a shot and see if it worked, and it ended up working out.
For those who don't know, Jethro's lead Stoner is under the name of Braz Cubas, which is a nod to the 19th century Brazilian novel by Machado de Assis. He's being literary with us even in the credits.
Do you want to hear a really silly story about the Braz Cubas and my wonderful friend who passed away, Nancy Bursky, who was the executive producer on the film? Okay.
I'm here for it. Let's go.
Nancy Bursky, renowned documentary filmmaker, most wonderful human being. We found out after I premiered my first film at Full Frame in Durham, which is a film festival she founded. She came to do the Q&A, and we became very fast friends. And she just said, we need to start collaborating and working on things together. And we found out that she lived 20 blocks north of me on the east side of Manhattan. And so we started just collaborating all kinds of things, and she took me under her wing and introduced me to everybody and took me over to D.A. Pennybaker's house to have dinner with him and Chris Hedges, his wife, and I got to ask him all the questions anyone would want to ask D.A. about Bob Dylan and Donovan and everything else. So Nancy was a really special person to me, and I told her I was making this independent film and would she like to be the executive producer. She said, of course, wonderfully, thankfully. So I was down south shooting it, and I never told her that my friend Ben couldn't play the leads, and I never told her that I was putting on the makeup. And so I sent her the first cut. When I had it cut, I said, I want you to watch the cut and let me know what you think. Send me your notes. And she called back just laughing hysterically. And she was like, I knew the story and I read the script, but this is so bananas and wild and out there. And she, she's like, as a New York Jew, which is how she described herself. And she was 78 at the time, or 77 at the time. She's like, I have learned so much about the South that I did not know before. And I really love this. And we're going to do great things with this. And she already had all the film festivals that she was going to call the film in and all of these things. The point of the story is, and Braz Cubas coming into this, is she's like, there's like 3 or 4 scenes where that guy, Stoner, looks just like you. And I was like, yeah, it's really weird, isn't it, Nancy? And she's like, yeah, it's so striking. Like, where did you find that guy? And I love his accent. And I said, well, that's a guy. He's actually Argentinian. He's a bow hunter from South Texas. And I just happened to run into him. And she was like, really? I was like, yeah, can you believe he can do a Southern accent like that? And he's Argentinian? And she was like, no, that's wild. I was like, I know, he's such a weirdo. I was like, but Nancy, I saw him and I kind of thought, he looks like me. And so it's really just complete megalomania that I cast somebody that looks a lot like me. And so she laughed again and was like, yeah, it's really crazy. She's like, that one scene, and she pointed out some scene, and she was like, he really, it's really eerie. He looks a lot like you. And I let it go for almost an hour, and while we were having this conversation and going through the film, and eventually, she kept talking about this and this and that, and she brought him up again, and I said, Nancy, I'm just fucking with you. That's me. And her response was, you little shit. And so then we had a really good back and forth after that. And the reason that we played so hard the gag of that Braz Cubas is a real actor and that's not me, we denied it. Everybody denied it for the year that we did film festivals, because that day that I had that conversation with Nancy and I messed with her, she thought that was really funny. And she said, when are you going to do the reveal? And I said, well, I will never do it till you say go, and it'll be you and I doing our Q&As when we're doing them. And you can be the person who reveals that I actually, did the character of Stoner and under the pseudonym of Braz Cubas. And she goes, okay, deal. But let's run with it for as long as we can and not tell anybody, because that'll be really funny. And I was like, I am with you 100%, Nancy. And so that was, we just kind of tried to honor Aunt Nancy in that, because she passed away while I was getting the film mixed and mastered. We were working on 3 films together. And if for anyone listening who doesn't know Nancy Bursky's work and her legacy, she did By Sidney Lumet. She did the film on the making of Midnight Cowboy, which I was lucky enough to be the colorist on. She has so many brilliant documentaries under her belt, and it's a tragedy she's gone, because she was one of the true champions of independent film.
I want to tie together the Braz Cubas mirror for the Stoner role as kind of the dead man walking. My personal favorite quote was, I'm a deceased writer, not in the sense of one who has written and is now deceased, but in the sense of one who has deceased and is now writing. I should have done that in a Southern accent, but I can totally picture Stoner saying that as part of his narration.
100%. That's one of my favorite quotes from the book. That's right on. I can't add to it. You already nailed it.
When your baby don't want you ramming around.
This is the section of the episode where we go around the panel and ask for their opening thoughts on Gunfighter Paradise. We'll start with friend of the show, Sila Blume.
I just finished watching that movie about 5 minutes before we started recording. The first impression that I got was something that contradicts a little bit or somewhat what Jethro said before we started officially about the seriousness of what you do, Jethro. The context, perhaps, for me, has to do with the fact that my father was a pastor. The first deep idea that I got in the first 10 or 20 minutes, he has such an intense dedication to everything the way, and this was one of my favorite parts of the film, when you see this, I don't know what you call that in English. This is a tool, and he was using that to turn the bacon with. Pliers, yes. This really means nothing, but it does mean a lot in terms of doing things outside of what is normal, common, even proper. This incredible focus, very refined, the way he's training his friend how to use the gun. And I think that most humans, in some form and to some level, they go through this inner or outer training to become very dedicated and very accurate about something. But what do you do if you don't have a subject to dedicate that to? Like the father of the young boy, his dedication is geared towards his God, the way he calls it, which in my opinion has nothing to do with God, but that's the way. But he has found something. And I was also asking myself, what is actually the inner subject for the main character outside of what we see in the film?
For Stoner, it's always in total conflict, because he is on the outside of a very strict dogma. He is very much devout, but he's also not the neighbor who is very devout in a very contemporary context as far as Christianity, very corporate minded, very go to church every Sunday, and it's all based on fear. But that's kind of where, the circle closes itself, Sila, is, this is all based on fear, right? And so most everything that Stoner is based on the idea of guilt and fear, which is baked into most of us who grew up in a very conservative Christian, American Christianity, which is not based on let's be good to each other and let's focus on what Jesus said during the Sermon on the Mount and all of these things about being kind and being good humans. It's based on what should you not do in order not to sin, in order to get into heaven. And so your whole life it's based around fear. And so I think those fears are what really drive Stoner and a lot of very religious people. And I think that's really unfortunate because we have enough existential dread and fear following us around every single day of our lives that it's unfortunate that something as beautiful as spirituality would also be part of that, or a main driving factor in a lot of people's lives.
A couple of lines from the posthumous memoirs of Braz Cubas that I remembered while watching this film. Since you decided to adopt that name, obviously I felt like I had permission. To the person who is leaving, everything is starting to be shadow, which is something that I felt with the Stoner character. And then when it comes to the neighbor, the best way to appreciate the whip is to have the handle in your hand. But the neighbor also says, your floor is covered with blood. Mine is with toys. And he uses that to say, this is what I am here to protect. And I'm not asking what your particular stance is on God or God's existence. To the neighbor and to Southern culture, the feeling I would get is that the only thing that is standing between Southern culture and cruelty at that moment is God.
Yeah, that's part of it, and I think that's something that we have to look very closely at, right? How we treat our neighbors and how we treat others, and that there are a lot of moments where, and I don't want to make a blanket sweeping statement about Southern culture and Southern people, because I am a Southerner. I'm from Texas and North Carolina. I am part of the South. The love letter, as much as it is a satire about Southern culture and about God and religion, it is also a love letter in a lot of ways. And a darn funny one too,
by the way.
Thank you. I'm my biggest hope for this was that as much as it was going to terrorize people, I wanted it to make people laugh as well. I wanted to try to balance both of those things.
Sila may have made it sound a little heavier than it actually is, and perhaps my quotes do. This is a laugh out loud comedy in the old-fashioned Marx Brothers way in terms of the sight gags and all of that type of thing. So just want to point out as we talk about the secondary and third layers of this film that I don't want anyone to go into this thinking that it is also not a very top-notch piece of entertainment.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, and I very much appreciate diving into the deep end and getting into the darkness of this film, because it does get very dark. But it is a majority of it is very, very much based around very, very dry comedy, which is satire and dry comedy are my favorite things ever. Favorite filmmakers, favorite writers, all of those kinds of things, because I think it adds to anything that has to do with the supernatural, with terror, with horror, with all the darkness. If there's something funny there, it only amplifies something that's terrifying. We premiered on Friday and again last night at AMC in New York, and we had so many huge belly laughs throughout the first hour of the film that it was just such a delight, because in the South as well, the Southerners who get it more than anybody else, of course, because they understand what red eye gravy is and all of these very nuanced Southern jokes that we're throwing at them. They fell apart, and I have to tell you, we screened the film for so many people that 300 people in the audience, and at least 3/4 of them were all extremely devout Southern Baptists, and they were laughing their heads off throughout the film, and I was very delighted by that, just as a plug to the comedy of the film.
Back to the same old place. Mama, where we long.
Oh, Eric, I have to jump in and compliment you on finding those or remembering those two quotes. For anyone who hasn't read it, Epitaph for a Small Winter by Machado de Assis is a beautiful, beautiful book. And that's where obviously Braz Cubas comes from, and that's part of a little bit of the psychology of stoner comes from part of that book and what happens in that book. So my hat's off to you for finding those and knowing those quotes.
I did drugs in my early 20s, so I went through that phase.
Excellent.
Let's transition over to Jennifer Trujillo of the Gilbert Baker Film Festival. As part of my transition to Jennifer, who is the closest we have to an industry insider here, you're self-distributing this film.
That is correct, yes. We had offers. We had about 6 throughout our film festival run, and I just was not, I've been through the distribution process before with my first film, which was a documentary feature, and so I know a little bit about the world of distribution and publicists and all of that.
For the audience, that's F11 and
F11 and Be There, which is about the photographer Burke Uzzell, who studied under Andre Cartier-Bresson and Ansel Adams and became the president of Magnum and has taken all these famous photographs for Life magazine and the cover of Woodstock. There's 2 people embracing. That's Burke. He's a completely nutso artist from North Carolina as well, and so we got along really well. And that was my first feature. But so that was we found a really wonderful actual distributor for that, which came out in 2020. And so going through that process, I've been through it a little bit. So for this film, the offers I was getting were more from distributors who have turned into aggregators rather than true distributors. And I just I did not like what were in the contracts. So we decided, I think there's enough people out here that want to see this film and have commented on the film and reviewed the film, and that if we start self-distributing, we'll get it out there, and we're getting it out there. So we're in theaters in New York and LA, and we're going to keep it rolling until we either just keep going with it as self-distribution, or we get a proper offer from a distributor that we really like.
Jennifer Trujillo, your commentary on Gunfighter Paradise.
That was a very punctuated pause.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been working on that all week.
That was very Christopher Walken.
I have literally been rehearsing it in the mirror all week.
I watched your film for the first time, at Eric's bequest for this podcast, and I'm glad that we're doing it. I was very pleased with that. I'm going to be honest, like I always am but I had to watch it again. And that's not enough for me in the watching. So it's visually really engaging. You really have a gift of things, and you just visually beautiful with like the symbolism of colors and framing and placement, and using the landscape and the nature, from the grass to the trees to the fog to all these things that I just thought was amazing. The sunlight, and then thematically tying in colors. To me, that all felt incredibly premeditated, deliberate, and just really rad and beautiful and interesting. And what I'm going to get at is I felt like it made the film on a visual and a symbolic and a comedic and like you said, dark comedy. I've heard other stuff, but it is a contemplative film as well. That comes through. I felt a lot. I really leaned into the concept of the mom and the puzzle, and that the film was like a puzzle and an onion. And maybe I'm wrong. I feel like you just built this layered onion that, or a puzzle, like, I don't know. I had an image of an onion and a Rubik's Cube mixed together, which is kind of crazy when I watched it. And I thought, how much fun is this going to be to watch it again? And in my mind, I was like, oh my God, how cool is this that I get to meet you, that we get to meet you as part of this podcast, and our listeners get to meet this. And for me, I guess I'm going to ask my future me. My current me wants to ask you and a future us a question, in the sense that I would love it. And I don't know where you're going with this. Like, this film would be a delight to sit and have a director's cut with you and other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go.
I would love to do that. I would
Bring
love
back
to do that.
DVD commentaries for sure.
Oh, I just think this would be so wild. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. I Jennifer, I love that. We will definitely do a commentary with the cast and crew. And what's funny is the puzzle idea and the onion idea came up so much in our Q&A last night at AMC with our moderator and with the crowd. So a lot of people feel the same way. And I can't tell you what a delight it is for that to be the reality that we're in right now, because, you know, making it and writing it, my favorite films are made as puzzle boxes, to where it's not just a to B story that's fun to watch, you laugh, you see it, and you're like, oh, I understood that, got it. You know, I do love those films. I love being entertained, and I love just to sit down and watch something straightforward. But my favorite type of cinema, my favorite type of films are films that I will go back and I'll watch, you know, several times. There's films I watch every single year, multiple times a year, because there's new things to find, you know, because someone was in there drawing these narrative circles that loop back to each other, that connect one thing to another. And then there's some color that represents this thing. There's some philosopher that was, you know, embedded in this piece of dialogue that you never picked up on. And I really love that kind of stuff. And so that was, you know, a big goal in writing the film and choosing, you know, the art direction and the production design and the colors and all those things you were referencing, was to make it be as, yes, let's make it funny and fun to watch and terrifying at moments and all of these things, and have a lot of social commentary. But also the real goal of the film was to build a puzzle box for people to look at and inspect, and, you know, ask a lot of questions that people can come up with their own answers as to what the film means at any
that's
point.
The trick, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
If you do a commentary track, is, of course, you can't peel the onion back too much, or you don't have any onion left.
That's very true. That's very true. So I'll probably just take the sound, or the director's commentary and Ben Affleck's commentary from Armageddon, and put that under the Blu-ray.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. What the hell were we thinking?
No, I get that, but I think we've been discussing literary works and film in classes for a long time, and I agree what you're saying. It might spoil some of your things. Okay, then selfishly for me, maybe this is a monetary way to raise money for your film fundraising. Like,
the truth comes out.
Well, no, I mean, selfishly for me, I need some spoon feeding on some of the references, or maybe the answer is, for now, maybe I will come back to you in a handful of months or in a few years, having watched it more times, and I will pick up. Like, I caught some biblical stuff. I caught some literary stuff. I caught some philosophical stuff, but it made me feel that there was about 20 more things that I was missing, which is amazing. And maybe that leaves me the delight of finding it from a different perspective, from different discussion groups, from different people. And maybe that's the answer, is get other people to watch it and make my own dialogues around the film, which is, I love discourse about film. I mean, I love critically analyzing and stuff. And you made something that allows for that. And so I guess I say yay and thank you for that. But I also just think it would be really fun to, I don't know some of it. I don't know. Anyways.
Sure. I appreciate that so much. I love it. I love that.
Well, there's a part of me that wants a director's track for my favorite film, Luis Buñuel's Simon of the Desert. Fuck you, Erin. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to know what it means.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what Sila talked about last week, before I forget. do we make the art? You make the art and leave it, and we have to interpret, or are you obligated as the creator to interpret it?
I'm happy to answer people when they ask me very specific questions about the film. If I did a director's commentary, it would be vague and opaque because the film is vague and opaque in a lot of ways on purpose. And I don't ever want to do a summation of the film of my intention, you know, for every moment, every color, every character, and how they relate to the other and what they mean to me, because then it's not open for interpretation in a lot of ways for people. And the reason to make a film like this is to make it open for interpretation, for sure. We had a really delightful moment on Friday night. Glenn Kenny, who is, you know, a critic for the New York Times, and Roger Ebert, and wrote this amazing book called Made Men, which is all about Goodfellas. And he spent like 2 years with Scorsese, you know, going through everything. And it's just a brilliant book. If you haven't read it, pick it up, read it. Glenn is just brilliant. He came to do the conversation for Gunfighter Paradise. And I won't say what he came up with, because it was wonderful that it wasn't recorded. I mean, other than my wife recording it on her phone. But it wasn't. I'm glad that it was only that crowd. It was like, you know, 80 people, me and Glenn, and he picked out 3 or 4 references that I did not think anyone would ever figure out. Even like hyper literary, you know, hyper academic, you know, big time film nerd cinephiles. But he closed this circle that I had, you know, made in my mind when I was first writing the script. And I was an absolute disbelief. I was like, Glenn, you're the only person who has ever put those things together in the way that you just said them, which is exactly how I was imagining him in the film, you know. And I had to, you know, give him props for that, because no one else since we've released the film that's watched it has ever figured that out. And it was wonderful, you know. But I would never tell anyone those specific references and what they meant in the film and how they relate to each other. But he had kind of solved this amazing puzzle. But it was just one of, you know, a lot that are cooked into the film. So it was a fun time with Glenn.
How delightful is that? That's amazing, and speaks to the magic of film and watching in community and having, you know, discourse, dialogue, discussions about film or books, or, you know what I mean? Like, that's an amazing part of, I don't know, our human existence and condition that is delightful for people that get it, right? Like, amazing. I'm glad you had that experience.
Yeah, it was wonderful, you know, and that's not to take away from, like, you know, Die Hard. I love Die Hard. Die Hard's the reason that I make movies. You know, I saw Die Hard. My dad explained what movies were, and I was like, well, that's what I'm doing. But there's probably plenty of literary discussions to have on, you know, the ultimate American experience, you know, and all of these things that are baked into Die Hard. I am a massive fan of straightforward action films. I'm also a massive fan of Buñuel. Obviously, anyone could tell I'm a huge fan of Lynch and the Coen brothers and all the rest that we could all name off. But I do really appreciate when folks take the time to bake a lot of ideas into cinema and into film, so we get to have these kinds of discussions. You know, that's a really, really important part of why I love movies and cinema so much.
I've read a lot of Lynch parallels from people who've seen this film, and to me, I don't think the Lynch parallel fits nearly. The shoe of Buñuel fits much better on the Waters foot, because Lynch had this idea that these ideas don't belong to us, that they kind of exist in a separate place and we're just pulling from them. And so there was kind of a purposeful disorganization to a Lynch film. So he was specifically making things so that the audience had to bring their own interpretations, so that the symbols could mean something different to each person, where I think your thoughts are much better organized purposefully. And I think this film, while, yes, it is somewhat vague, a lady in the lake is a lady in the lake, you know, and, you know, a yellow billow in a woods is a yellow billow in the woods. These are, we aren't asking ourselves, a burning Gadsden flag is a burning Gadsden flag. And while each of us can interpret these as symbols of things based on our own experience, the symbol is there, unlike a Lynch film where you as an audience are asked to fill in the gaps, because Lynch doesn't feel it's his responsibility to organize these thoughts into anything, because he doesn't actually feel any ownership of them.
100%. I think that's just an incredible analysis, and I would agree with you completely. I'm honored that anybody drops the name Lynch in any of their reviews, as anybody would. I'm even more honored when someone drops the name Buñuel. And I love Lynch, and I've always, grown up loving Lynch, as most of us have. But I don't. I'm not in the camp of how he made his films and his refusal to interpret any part of any of them. But I love the fact that he did that, because now I get to watch Lynch films forever and never really understand fully anything other than what it means to me, which is a beautiful thing and a beautiful way to approach films. But that's definitely not my approach. I'm saying very specific things, even though there's 15 or 20 different things that are being said simultaneously. And there are very, like you said, Eric, there are very specific symbols that you can look at and understand immediately the basic interpretation for what's being said or shown on screen.
Erin Brown, we had a 1 week streak in a row where I didn't get a text from you saying what a fucked up movie that this film broke. With that in mind,
I said fucked up. I said fucking weird.
Fucking weird. That is correct. That is correct.
I almost texted both of you that, just FYI. Like, what am I watching and why? And then I thought, no, I have to trust the process. I'm learning that this is what we do. Just FYI. I almost, in the middle of the night,
you haven't figured this show out yet. I figured by the Tuki Fuki episode, you guys had me pegged.
I am on some roller coaster with you, my friend. Anyways, I over the past 2 months, I'm just like, what is happening and why am I here? And then it's like, here we are again.
I'm like extremely clean acid. As long as you finish the trip off 12 hours from now, it'll be over. Erin, your thoughts on Gunfighter Paradise?
So when I was watching this, the characters all seemed familiar, not in the sense of I've seen the same characters in other movies, but I've met people like these people. And part of it is because I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Missouri, which is like north of I-70. It's more Midwestern, but south of I-70, it's more Southern. So I've got family in the Ozarks, so I'm familiar with that type of Southern. I lived in the Florida Panhandle for a while, so again, that type of Southern. And my brother lives in North Carolina, so I've been there. And these people all felt like people that I've met or could easily meet, which I thought was great. It was very familiar. The cable guy especially was funny to me when he sees Stoner with his face paint and says, I will come back another time. I love that delivery. And the reenactors, especially the one that was into it because his friend from D&D got him into it. The other one was like so serious about it. But one thing that was throughout the entire film, it was like Stoner's entire thing was guns. That's what he knows best. It was so pervasive. There's weaponry everywhere. They even were driving around laughing at the guy with the sword and whatnot. My question is, how does that gun culture relate to the rest of the themes of the movie, the religious themes and all of that stuff? Is it just because it's so inherent to Southern conservatism, or what is it?
To your point about just going back to for a second to Joel and Joel's delivery of that line, a really fun, little Easter egg is that Joel is actually named Joel, and he was actually a cable man. And he's been my best friend since we were 13 years old.
Nice.
So he is very much just actually being himself, looking at me in face paint and being completely creeped out, and that's an honest reaction. So
that's amazing.
Other than Jessica Hecht, who everybody knows from all sorts of things and is just a brilliant actor, and everything, everybody else in the film is a first-time actor, and they're all just a big group of my friends.
Just as you're our first Emmy winner, she's also got an Emmy. We're trying to get our own EGOT here on the show.
Love it.
We had an Oscar winner last week, Kevin Wilmot. So we've got the Grammy and the Tony still.
You'll get them. You'll get them. I'll send some folks your way.
Love you.
I didn't know they were all first-time actors. The neighbor at the end was so effectively creepy, and his accent was a little hard to understand. But I was amused that he said that Stoner's mother was kindly strange instead of kind of strange. It's like, that's very specific. That is a very specific accent right there. I thought that was great.
Yeah, that's Chris Bauer, a wonderful human being and really good friend. And he is actually 6'8" and has a voice like a mountain, and is just wonderful. But he, I told him he's the first time he's a filmmaker as well, but he's never been in front of on that side of the lens. We've been friends and made films for such a long time together. And I said, I think you'll be the perfect neighbor for this film. Asked him if he was interested. He said, sure. And so he actually, everyone else is just kind of playing a version of themselves, except for, the asshole Confederate soldier reenactor. Rob is the sweetest person on earth. He's not that guy. He was acting, actually. But everybody else is kind of just playing a version of themselves. But Chris, at the end, he told me that he did 3 weeks of reading the Old Testament to get prepared for that role. And he came in and he knew his lines. He read all the lines that were in the script, but he also improv. So I had like 15 or 20 minutes of him absolutely going berserk. And it was one of the funniest, most fun, most terrifying things I've ever witnessed, to have a 6'8" guy, going that hard. But yeah, all first-time actors all did a wonderful job. But
yeah, they really did. They were amazing.
As far, yeah, thank you. They had a really good time last night at the Q&A. We were all talking about everybody being first-time actors and how much fun it was. But as far as the gun culture, it's and all the weaponry within the film, the idea of the gunfighter is this American symbol of the ultimate good guy, the ultimate sheriff out in the West, when the reality is that we just kind of annihilated all these different tribes of Native Americans in order to take over this country, and that this country was founded on violence, and it became, the gunslinger. Yes, there were good gunslingers and there were good gunfighters, as there are good cops and all of those things, but a large part of the country, I think, has now mutated into thinking that being this really patriotic, eagle riding, flag waving like freak that's cool with violence is also deeply part of being co-opted into being a good Christian, which I think is just absolutely insane. And that being said, I also have to, my dad is a Vietnam veteran. He was a policeman. I grew up on a gun range. My dad's a gunsmith. By the time I was 11, I was competing in speed shooting competitions. That's me as an 11-year-old, and those VHS tapes in the film. I was, a competitive speed shooter when I was 11 throughout my teens, and when I go back to North Carolina and I'm hanging with my dad, and he's like, hey, you want to go to the gun range and target shoot? And so we go to the gun range and we target shoot even to this day. So it's still very much a part of the culture. And this film is not a commentary in the sense of having the specific conversation about guns and gun laws and gun violence. We all know it's rampant and it's a problem in this country. The film is a commentary on the hybridization of religion, of Christianity, of this idea of the ultimate American male, archetype, being this gunslinger, also this hyper-religious person. And when I was writing it in 2021, I didn't have any. I thought, okay, this is the most ultimate, over-the-top, ridiculous version of this person that I can imagine. And unfortunately, you fast forward to now in 2026, and I think there's quite a few stoners just hanging out, and walking around.
Kevin Wilmot last week. He had wanted to do a mockumentary about Senator Joe McCarthy becoming president of the United States, and everything that he thought was going to be parody or funny, the Republican Party beat him to it. Like he had a joke about somebody running a campaign ad where they were firing a machine gun, and of course now, every state has at least one candidate doing that in their ads.
This was a very beardy film. There were a lot of beard. Like, everybody had a beard.
Have you been to North Carolina recently?
Yeah, last summer.
It is a very beardy film.
It is. It's very beardy.
I've never heard that used as a descriptor, beardy, and it's kind of beautiful. I'm really happy that this is happening right now, where I'm being introduced to a new term. And you're right, it is a very beardy film.
Yeah, everybody had one. It didn't really strike me as odd, because I do know that I've got a friend in North Carolina that's got an epic beard. So, I know it's a thing. It's just...
You have a friend in me who has a very epic beard. Thank you very much, Erin.
Okay, yes, your beard is also epic. It's lovely.
When it comes to the characters in this film, which again is meant to be laugh out loud funny, are they replacing something with the guns, or has the gun culture become their culture?
I don't know if there's anything being replaced. I think that guns and apple pie, I think that part of the reason, for it to be called Gunfighter Paradise, and part of the reason for there to be so many guns in the film, is that there are more firearms in this country than there are human beings. So I think that it's just purely if you're making a film called Gunfighter Paradise, and if you grew up like I did, where I was on the gun range with my dad by the age of 5 shooting, and then I became a competitor at the age of 11. That I just think it's so commonplace that it just becomes the same way that somehow, some way in the film, stoner wearing camouflage face paint just kind of seems normal. Which is really strange. It's at some point for most audience members, they were like, yeah, at some point it just became like, I don't know why he never takes that off, but I guess that's just him. It's kind of, I kind of feel the same way about, guns in America. We're never getting that genie back in the bottle, unfortunately, because it's always been there, since this country was created.
Well,
but,
as a
yeah,
flying
I don't know.
lefty, as long as they have them, I have them.
There you go. And I think anybody that isn't trained even just for safety purposes on firearms that lives in America, if you move to Japan or if you move to Norway or wherever where their firearms aren't really anywhere, then great. You don't need to worry about being trained and knowing how to pick one up safely and put it away safely. But I think in America they're so prevalent and so everywhere that they are so dangerous that if you don't have a proper fear of them, even growing up from the time that I was 5 until now, I have a very proper fear of when I look at that thing. It's a thing made to kill other human beings, and so you have to treat it as such. And even if folks don't plan on going to the gun range or shooting or doing any of those things, having safety courses to understand that if you did see a firearm somewhere, how to pick it up and inspect it to make sure that it's empty and where to place it and for it to not go off and where the safety is, all those things. I think those are important, but it's not for me to preach that to people. I think this is all common knowledge in America at this point.
And back to what you were saying about the title, if you have a film called Gunfighter Paradise without any guns, that would literally be Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
But this is a history podcast, and so let's take a moment to put Gunfighter Paradise into historical perspective. And Jethro, as a fellow cinephile, speak to me about your use of these lingering takes. While I was watching it, I was comparing it to Antonioni, but here it kind of takes on a life of its own. The camera seems to keep filming a few seconds after the characters leave the frame. For me, it worked on 2 levels. It gave me time to reflect on the scene, which, as Erin pointed out, is usually some really fucked up shit. But it also, when it was paired with your almost poetic narration, created a visual tableau for this auditory poem, because this is a film that, as when we were reviewing the plot, you might not make as much sense, but it makes sense on a visual level. It's a different kind of storytelling where the position of the camera, the length of the shots, the Goddardian jump cuts are as much a part of the narrative as the character development and as the dialogue.
Yeah, I'm really a huge fan of long takes and of leaving the camera on sticks, or on a tripod, right? And kind of leaving the camera alone and letting the shot do its magic, letting the characters do their thing and letting the camera linger, not to the point to where it's like, oh my goodness, why are we still watching this shot, and that these blinds blowing in the breeze forever. But I think it's all about rhythm, and I have the huge honor to also teach film, and so whenever I'm talking to cinematography students or directing students or whoever, or if they want to do it all, I really try to lean into a lot of films that leave, the camera trickery to very specific moments in the film when it's called for, because I really think the best cinema is really, what is not really fancy camera moves and all of these camera tricks and all those kinds of things. I think my favorite shots in all of cinema are just a camera on a tripod and you're watching the story unfold and it has this specific rhythm to it. And I think, that's another part of doing that is to find a rhythm for a film. And this film has a very specific rhythm. You read Gunfighter Paradise, you think, oh, it's probably gonna be a lot of shooting and diving and breaking glass and people kicking each other, and it's absolutely not that. It's very, very different. It's a very slow.
It's people hitting their heads on chandeliers and slipping and falling. No, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. There's a lot of banana peels. There's grape jelly flying everywhere. It's completely goofball front to back. No, but it's I do. There's nudity. There's nudity. There's guns. There's fire. There's fear, death, fear and loathing. It's all there. It's an American tale. I'm a big fan of finding a rhythm for a film and making sure that your film feels like a piece of music. In that the filmmaker make sure that you're in good hands as far as a style that is going to be cohesive throughout. And I really like to leave the camera alone a lot and just have a good framing, because it allows you to get absorbed in the moment when you're not constantly cutting over the shoulders and doing lots of fancy camera movements. I mean, there's a magic to just having a camera set up on a tripod.
And to go back to my rubbing up against the David Lynch comparisons, when I was watching this film, I saw a lot more Terrence Malick than David Lynch in terms of not just the composition, but the way you blend the dialogue and the narration in with the rather beautiful, with a capital B, scenery that you capture. Let's geek out for a second and talk about the glass that you chose to capture some of these long takes. I had made a few guesses based on your earlier film and history, and you emailed me back to tell me that every single thing I got wrong, which I took as an absolute compliment, because most people don't take the time to actually read the scripts when I send them. You used the Zeiss ZE photography primes, and then you also used a 90 millimeter cinema zoom. And tell me what the different lenses that you were using and what you were attempting to capture by using them.
I'm a real big fan of using what you've got. And I've had a set of Zeiss photography primes since the early mid-2000s that I would shoot a lot of photography on, and that's what I really started shooting films on. And they're wonderfully sharp. They've got a good character to them, and I've just used those forever. I'm very comfortable with them, and so I would shoot for the wides. I was using a 21 millimeter Zeiss, and these are not expensive lenses. These are not like the Zeiss Ultra Primes, which are $6,000-$8,000 a piece or anything like that. These are relatively affordable lenses that were built for DSLR cameras,
but they give a much warmer texture to those interiors.
They do, yeah. They're wonderful glass, and so I used a 21 millimeter, a 35 millimeter, and a 50. And then for majority of the film, though, I was using this Ingenue 30 to 90 millimeter, which is an f2, and it's got a really nice warm quality. It's got a very soft quality, and that is a specifically built for cinema lens. And
note for the audience, because of I don't want them to get confused, because when I say zoom, I usually use it as a negative. The zoom does not occur. He kept his hand in his pocket and never used the zoom while film was running through the camera.
100%. No, never once. Yeah, that Ingenue is just a beautiful do anything at any moment.
It kind of gives a 3D look, doesn't it, to some of the shots, with the way that it really keeps the background in crisp, out of focus, if that's a phrase, and flattens the background against the characters.
Yes, 100%. And it is, Ingenue is not known for having affordable glass. They're the ultimate high end in cinema zooms. You can't get any better or can't get any more expensive than Ingenue. But this is one of the first one they came out with that was somewhat affordable, and so it's what I've been using on a lot of films for a lot of years now since it came out. And it allows you, especially on a hyper indie with almost a zero budget, crew, to move really quickly. And when I was, framing these shots and setting up the blocking and doing all these things, I could run really, really quickly by using that Ingenue 30 to 90. And then for wide shots, most of the film, there's a couple of shots with there's different Zeisses, but most of the film, I was using that wide 21 millimeter Zeiss, or I would throw the Ingenue on there and just run really quickly.
It's interesting with the 21 millimeter wides that during the showdown with the pine tree scented killer, you allowed the barreling to be on screen. the tiny bit of distortion, which of course fits because you're in a different space. It's not supposed to look strictly realistic. Was that a lucky accident, or was that something where you were shooting it slightly wider and planning on mapping it out, and then you saw it in the editing room and it was like, oh no, it works?
That was one of those great accidents that when I framed it and saw the barreling, I was just like, oh, this is beautiful. It definitely wasn't intention going into it. But when it happened, when I was looking through the viewfinder, I was like, oh, there we go. That needs to happen. It's definitely an amplification of what we're shooting. So let's roll with it.
It feels almost like the world is collapsing down on Stoner at that moment, as you see the kind of bend in the frame on the sides and on the top.
100%. It really, really helps. There's some really wonderful things that when you put a certain filter, or you get some barreling going on or anything like that really help.
Well, in the age of digital, we get so used to them just matting that out, that it's even more shocking to a modern audience, I think.
I would agree with you. My cinematography students always, when they see things like that, they're like, "Ooh, we got to get rid of that." And I'm like, wait. Let's see if it actually adds to the scene. To get really nerdy about cinematography, which I'm a big fan of.
I'm getting excited.
Okay, so we're gonna get super nerd glasses on right now. I am a massive fan of Brian De Palma and everything he's done, and he's been a huge influence on me, especially when he uses a split diopter. And so I knew for a fact I was going to try to find at least 3 or 4 moments in the film to use a split diopter, which I also used on the John Cale music videos, which was a delight to be able, because Wise Blood and John Cale were in several shots where I was using a split diopter. And so some of my favorite shots in the entire film of Gunfighter Paradise are using a split diopter between the neighbor and Stoner, and also Joel and Stoner, that for maximum effect and weirdness and making something look really strange and not human. A split diopter is just kind of half of a lens or half of a filter, which not a real lens, but it's a piece of glass that's built kind of like, if you're looking at glasses that are concave on one side and flat on their half. What's happening is you are putting a magnifying piece of glass on half of your lens, so that you have one character that's pretty far in the background, and you have one character that's in the foreground. And normally what happens when you do that is you cannot have both those people in perfect sharp focus, right? So one of them is out of focus, the other one is in focus, who you've pulled focus. And in dialogue, you have a focus puller who is focusing on one person speaking, and then when the other person, if it's a 2-shot where you're staying on both those characters in that same frame, the focus puller pulls the focus to the other person who's speaking, and back and forth we go, right? With a split diopter, what happens is when you put that magnifying piece of glass on the left or the right side of your lens, what you're able to do is you're able to have a person very in almost extreme close-up be perfectly sharp and in focus, and also someone that's pretty far away is also perfectly sharp and in focus. And it doesn't make sense, because even your eyes, when you're looking at someone that's close to you, everything else is out of focus in the background. So when you see that on the frame, it's very eerie. It's got this eerie sense to it, and it's used for a lot of tension in scenes in dialogue, to have both of those characters who are not close to each other be perfectly sharp and in focus. And you can spot it in a lot of classic films like De Palma's, and a lot of other people have used it even in movies like JFK with and you can actually spot it a lot of the times when you see two people who are not close together in a 2-shot who are perfectly in focus, and there's a little bit of blurring that happens down the middle of the frame or wherever that split diopter is happening because of the distortion between that piece of glass that's on your lens, and it'll give this little blurring effect. You'll see it happen. So if you watch Blowout or you watch most Brian De Palma films, he'll use a split diopter, and you'll see this little blur in the middle of we try to hide it as best as we can when we do it, but it's kind of, you can spot it when someone's using a split diopter.
You can't cut from within those scenes, because anything that you shoot without it is going to look so incredibly different that it's almost going to seem like it's being shot with a different camera on a different set.
Yeah, so it's really, you really need to have your dialogue figured out if you want to use that, or what you're actually showing, to where you can leave that camera there on that specific shot, and so you have your characters talking back and forth in a long take. That way you've got that really tense, eerie feeling with using the split diopter. And so you're not doing a lot of cutting when you're using one of those.
Well, and you normally need a ton of light, but you shot mostly with natural light for this film.
Yeah, and going back to your mallet comment, that's a massive compliment just to hear that name mentioned in anything that I'm involved with.
I'll give you one more compliment. I didn't find your film nearly as well. This sounds like a reverse compliment. I didn't find your film boring. And
Wonderful.
I find most mallet films bore the shit out of me.
Well, you're not alone, because I get a lot of my students who I show Days of Heaven and, Tree of Life and all of these things to them, and they were like, come on, we've seen enough wheat fields. What are we doing here? And I have to explain to them, I'm like, guys, this is all natural light. Look how beautiful this is. Almost all of Gunfighter Paradise, except for the night scenes, is shot with as much natural light as possible. I was using very few, lights here and there, and mostly bounces and things like that to maximize the natural light that we had. And I love working like that.
What were you using? Because you had a lot of depth of field.
I was over 4, 8, 11 at times, up into 16 on a couple of shots, because I do really love a deep focus, because I think so much streaming and movies and all of cinema, whether it's cinema, which is on our TVs these days, and in our theaters, there's so much beautiful storytelling happening, but so much of it is so ruined by the fact that people are only choosing to shoot at like F3 or F2 or even below it, and everything is just this mush in the background, and that does look beautiful at times.
I will defend the Luke Higginsons of this world, because when you're working on a low budget, you're going to constantly be shooting places that aren't geographically next to each other, and you need some way to mask that so that the shots match. And I think on an extremely low budget, the use of telephotos and higher f-stop is a good way to create cohesiveness without having to pay a crew for a 20-40 day shoot.
Sure, absolutely. There's so much beauty in being able to see a deep focus, shot. There's so much beauty in being able to see the background and things. I love a really good soft f-stop of a 2 where everything's out of focus and everything's in a bokeh and it's so soft and beautiful. Like there's nothing. Those shots at the end of the movie Heat, where everything's shot at night and it's like on probably f1.4 or something. Those are so beautiful. But I don't know. I just there's so much dialogue that's just over the shoulder, back and forth, where everything's out of focus except for the eyes these days, that there's so many films where most of the film is just that, and that drives me absolutely bananas. So I love good deep focused shots.
And most of those you shot with the prime lenses, with the 21, correct?
Yeah, a good bit of them I did shoot with that prime. There were several that I did shoot with the ingenue as well, where we went way up in f-stop.
And for people at home, you are the cinematographer and actor and the editor, just to put that out there, right? So,
Braz Cubas is the...
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
When the boys got to running down, didn't run like wheels. I'd have been down to see them run, seen Mr. Will St.
I got one last question, and that you brought up color correction. And let's talk about the color correction on this film, the vividness of the yellows and the greens especially. How much color correction was there, and how much of the color correction went into the secondary visual narrating of the story, the way that you tell the story visually as opposed to character development and dialogue?
As I always try to do, and when I try to guide anyone, any indie filmmakers or any students, is to, no matter what look you're going for, try to get it as close as you can in camera while you're on set, because it's going to save you a lot of work in post-production. That doesn't mean you can always do that. You can just try to get close. And so we dialed in the look pretty close on set. And then I went and amplified a few things, as you do in post. And so the things that I really tweaked, obviously, are the yellow fabric, the monolith that's in the woods hanging that we keep coming back to. That's got a lot of yellow pushed in. It was a yellow fabric, but I pushed a lot of yellow into that, and then we put an effect on it to make it glow, and put a backlight on it, just to really enhance it and make it stand out. And there's a little bit of greens that are obviously pushed because of the face paint on Stoner. I wanted those to really pop. But yeah, I really tried just to lean into the natural look that we had gotten in camera in most everything, and only really push, when we have the red at the end, that's pushed a good bit. The greens in the face paint and the yellows those have got a little push behind them. But most everything else I tried to leave, feeling as relatively natural as I could.
The yellows in the mummified cat, the yellows in the chandelier, those natural? You did that?
Oh, the chandelier is pushed in that one shot. There's one shot where it's pretty pushed, and that's when Joel is singing in a cappella. But the yellows in the mummified cat, that's just how it looked, really. I didn't really push much there.
Follow up to the bone wheel, so bone wheel, where in the world you're home? I stayed over in Texas, won't be here very long, got to have a time.
Finally, I'd like to talk about the landscape for independent film. With streamers now paying only pennies a view, how's anyone going to make a living doing this? This is my substitute for the "what advice do you have for young filmmakers" that I hear at the end of every interview.
My advice is that it's going to take time, especially now, but I think it's a very hopeful time. I know the industry is, incinerating itself in so many different ways, and nobody really knows what's coming next. I will say that there are some really wonderful success stories from folks who really stuck with it. And where there used to be this thing where it was like you got your film done, you released it in festivals, and you had a year, and the clock started ticking before you could get distribution, and then it was too late, and then your film was too old, and all of that bullshit is in the past. And there's a lot of films that premiered back in 2022 that the filmmakers stayed after it. They built an audience. They did all the work that distributors used to do, and they built a fan base, and they got theatrical releases and released them independently in theaters, because people very much want to see original stories in theaters. It's just the giant studios are refusing to make those in mass for people, and so it takes time and an extreme amount of commitment and work ethic to get it out there in front of people and to build that audience who are lobbying to see your film and to bring your film places. Just know that it's going to take time, but if you are that committed and you make a film that you put in front of people that they really enjoy, and you get a bunch of feedback that says, hey, this really has legs, you need to get this out there in front of people, then take that cue and be ready to put in the work, because it could and probably will take several years if you don't have a great distributor, which there aren't that many of, to do it on your own. But I can tell you, as someone who's going through it right now, that it is absolutely possible, and a lot of wonderful things are happening for Gunfighter Paradise. And so I would say keep the faith and make that movie.
I am obsessed with that that whole paradigm as where I sit in the world as a audience and as film festival. I am really struggling with the role of being in this role as a senior manager director of a film festival that I stepped into from an audience perspective. So I got pulled into the festival by being an active, interactive member of the audience, and then found out and then got pulled in on the team. And this is a legacy film festival. Gilbert Baker himself, who created the rainbow flag and gave it to the LGBTQI+ community, started the festival that I'm the director of. And so I feel this torch, this bear, and I am an obsessive, having volunteered at other film festivals, go to films, support it. I want to be the change I want to see in the world, supporting independent film for years, helping in any way I can. And I'm obsessed with the concept of what you said, and I love it, that building your own audience. And I think we as members of the audience, me as film festivals, as the filmmakers themselves, we can leverage a non-scarcity mindset by working with each other to celebrate and amplify each other's work and connecting. That's what I do obsessively with the film festival, trying to connect the people who bring the stories to life on screen, the stories on screen, and then with the audience that is affected and effected by those stories on screen. And then making the connection of, oh my God, this is a filmmaker who tells stories I love and styles I love, and leveraging that, and then also leveraging the filmmakers who collaboratively, as working styles and stuff, can celebrate and amplify each other and connect, like that. Their audience becomes your audience, my audience becomes yours, and that Venn diagram of overlap will only grow our world of people growing and supporting independent films and getting them to places where people can see these stories on screen that are making them feel seen, heard, valued, loved, understood, respected, or allowing a a puzzle to unwrap together, or sit in your seats and have a joyride of Die Hard, right? Like, anyways, that leads me to a question for you. Are there other ways that you think film festivals can be helping? I mean, that's the angle that I go at, trying my best in every level to pull communities together, to have those connections and dialogue and spark that connection and growth together, and make the audience, the humans at home that watch film, that enjoy film in every level, from fluff to deep philosophical, they are part of the process by rating, reviewing, participating, giving money, using their voice and the time to celebrate and amplify films. Is there more that you would like film festivals to be doing, or do you think there's a place that, from your perspective, you would want us to be doing? It's a big question.
No, Jennifer, I so appreciate everything you said, because I think it's right on, and I'm so glad there are folks like you who are the folks who are running those film festivals, who are in that same vein and have that mindset, and are because that is what it is about, is the independent film community, and we have to figure out these alternative methods to get our films out there and in front of people. And so many folks that I talk to are looking at the same thing. Okay, well, how do I go about getting this, getting my film seen and and finding that community that's going to appreciate this and amplify this? And it's exactly what you just said. That's what has to happen, and it has to happen at a very large scale across lots of film festivals. And we need to build, nonprofits and organizations that are they're there, but we need a much bigger set of them, and a much bigger conglomerate, as it were, of film festivals communicating with each other to get those films out there. The film festival world is a really tough world. If you don't have, the big majors, of course, if you don't have an inside person to let you in with a big name and your film or a big producer, it's nearly impossible to stay. And I feel for film festivals in the way that they're getting so much slack, because people are like, oh my God, I didn't get into any film festivals, and I applied to 150 and spent thousands of dollars. And it's also like, yeah, well, we live in an age where a lot of film festivals are getting 5, 10, 15, 20,000 submissions each year. So how are they supposed to watch those films and give them a fair shake? It's a really difficult job. And I have a lot of good friends who are festival directors, and I commend them for the insanely hard work that it is to do that. I don't really have any notes on what film festivals could be doing better, other than everything you just said. I think all film festivals need to lean into what you just covered, and really lean into trying to make sure that that we find ways to elevate the people that are out there really, really making great independent films, and to get them audiences that can get behind them. And the filmmakers themselves have to be willing to do a lot of the work themselves to get a foothold in the industry. And once you've got a foothold, things get a lot easier. I will say that this is a note for any filmmaker out there listening who's like, I think I've got a great film or a great story, I'm going to make it, or I've made it, now I'm trying to figure out the next step. I can't get in any of my film festivals that I wanted to. It's not easy, but finding a really good publicist is one of the keys to the game, and it's all very much a big game. And if you find a really good publicist who really believes in your film and knows what to do with it, that's one of the keys to the industry, is because that publicist will be able to...
She didn't want to be named, but shout out to Kelly, by the way.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
She doesn't want to be named in the show, no last names. She'll hear this, and she knows who.
Absolutely. Kelly is fantastic. So big shout out to Kelly, 100%. And if you... Yeah. For both of my films, I should say. Feature films, that is. So... find someone, and they don't have to be a giant firm. It doesn't have to be, some huge, 12 staffed, publicist company that's been around since the 70s. But if you find somebody who knows their way around the industry and has all the connections that you need to get good press and to get your film out there and to find your audience who's going to appreciate your story, that's the key. Right. And yes, you need to pay them money, because they do a very hard job, and they've worked a long time in order to establish themselves as a good publicist. But that's the key, right? The key really isn't like, oh, I landed in Berlin. There's been a lot of films that have landed in Berlin and Telluride and Sundance and Cannes that never went anywhere and didn't do anything, that never got bought by a distributor, that never got, a lot of press. There's also been tiny little films like Hundreds of Beavers that have been massive successes. they released theatrically, independent, and are still playing theaters right now, right?
I really enjoyed Hundreds of Beavers. That was a hilarious movie. Just throwing that out there.
Great film.
And this is something that comes up on the show all the time when people tell me, hey, you should do a show on mainstream Hollywood film and be more popular. My answer is, how do you know that? You don't know what's going to be popular a week from now.
That's the right response.
And there's also 1,000 different places you can go for a Hollywood mainstream podcast, whereas there's only one world cinema history. So in your face, motherfuckers.
Yeah, take that. Take that. There is only one.
There was an old maxim, though, in the independent film industry that doesn't apply anymore, which is never make a film with a larger budget than you can recoup for your investors. But with streamers paying $2,000-$3,000 for films that cost $100,000 to make, that it doesn't go anymore, And so until they fix that mathematical problem, it's going to be an uphill battle.
It is, and it's also one of those things where you'll be investing some money in your film, but if it's something that you love, it's something that you want to get out there in the world, and it's not money that you're going to you're going to lose your house over. Don't make yourself homeless by any means just to make that film. Although some filmmakers have rolled the dice on that and come out okay, but I know a lot that haven't. But it's okay to I luckily landed a really great gig making a big set of films for this project on architecture, and I set a lot of that budget aside to make Gunfighter Paradise, and it was still made for peanuts, but we had enough money to get people tequila and Mexican food and hamburgers and get them hotels and bring them out into the country and all into the things.
So it's not just a Kansas thing.
No, it's a low budget thing. If you can't pay them, you can feed them. That's what you got to do.
That's the key. Just tequila
or get them drunk.
Yeah, get them drunk, get them fed, get them a bed to sleep in, and just count on your friends.
Can I work on your next crew? Because that doesn't sound too bad.
Of course, we got and sometimes we even splurge and we get Patron. So come on, Eric, let's do it.
I'm on my way.
There is no couch that could endure being pulled by a truck like that. And that is not possible with a normal couch.
No, he put a carpet underneath it. I totally rewound that to watch that technique.
Oh, okay.
Sila, there's an interesting anecdote for that. My prop master / gun range safety officer / art designer, and we worked on a lot of big budget movies as far as a prop design and set dressing. Is Kyle Lewis, amazing guy. He was a producer on the film. He made 2x4 skis that he fixed and screwed to the bottom of the legs of that couch to make it fly around the field like that. And so that's how it worked.
The magic is dead when you explain it.
No, it was a wonderful magic.
Next time you're gonna tell me Superman can't fly.
Oh, I would never say that.
I am a very big, among other things, but I'm very deeply into culinary stuff. So I really, really enjoyed, on one side, the camera work, the framing of certain machinery, including the burner, the coffee, preparing breakfast, this detail. Also the recurring sound and the somehow symbolic sound of bells that you attach to the falling of the bullets as well as the chandelier. I really enjoyed this manipulation of the sound to force it into being music, even though it's not, I only hear bells, but it was very in different references. From very early on, I had this incredible draw to your mother, at least the mother on the film, and the way you described a little bit weird, but poetic, but very loving, her toes. And the whole film, even in the context of guns, funny enough, in the context of the United States being such a gun country, to me, these and also the girl in the lake that she's taking care of, she's cleaning her lake. Everything, incredible expressions of what I understand as love. the connection to the people you work with, the collective interest for your mother from you and your brother as well as your friend. There are so many very profound, at least for me, they work as very profound expressions of love. And I really enjoyed that aspect, like I said, because you put that in the context of a film about guns. You also mentioned towards the beginning the details about your father being strict and kind. And of course, that's a very personal thing for me because that's exactly what I have always said about my father. He was extremely strict, but extremely loving. And I don't think that's very common. So again, is this underlining of how much love is going into the film and being expressed through the film.
Well, Sila, I really appreciate you diving that deep into it, especially concerning the details, because I think details for me are everything. You know, whether it's details in the script, whether it's details in the cinematography and the way the food is presented, whether it's details like you're saying about the way that our fathers are, because my father is very much that, you know, that's him in that VHS, and my dad has been just a wonderful, wonderful father, but he's also was extremely strict. So we have that in common, Sila, and but it's always in the details for me, and I'm very grateful that there are folks like yourself that are watching the film and leaning that heavily into those sorts of details, because it's an honor, truly.
I felt so much in love with this woman, with your mother. Not, of course, romantically. It is just such an incredible, the way it is presented, or the way I read the presentation to use, even the very, very short seconds where you see some kind of reflection of her face. As I guess everybody would agree that she doesn't have beautiful feet for whichever reason, but everything is spoken about her, and when we see her, it's just an incredible, monumental reason to love. It's really, really great, really good.
I bet
Thank
it
you
made
for
her really
that.
good at swimming.
Very good at swimming. And, you know, to your point, Sila, that, you know, there's only a couple of voices of reason in the film, truly, you know, and I'm not going to start pointing things out because that's for people to watch the film. But there is a theme there when it comes to the way that not everyone has great mothers. There's terrible mothers and terrible fathers and terrible human beings. So not everybody has the same experience, but
That is very true.
Right. But there's a very special thing for me in the film about mothers and voices of wisdom that you should listen to that oftentimes we don't. And that's 100% a theme throughout the film. And so I'm glad that the mother affected you in that way.
I thought it was a really odd film, but I really liked it. I liked the way it was shot. I liked the dichotomy of the red and the yellow lights at the end with the neighbor. I liked the couch thing. That was so goofy, but I can see people doing that. We
actually did do that as teenagers. There was no legs on the bottom of the couch, but we were teenagers. We would get drunk on tequila and haul each other around the woods in a couch with tied to a truck. So real life story.
Yeah.
How are you still alive today?
Am I, though?
That's deep.
So, yeah,
Erin, if you enjoyed this film, I suggest you go back and rewatch Simon of the Desert.
No.
Yeah, I think you're older and wiser now.
Yeah, but
and more disturbed too.
And more disturbed. Yes. Maybe I rubbed off on you a little bit. Maybe you're just a little more crazy.
I'm just gonna say exploding frog. I can't get past the exploding frog. Sorry.
It's a symbol for Catholic guilt because they always thought that they could transfer the evil of a spirit into a frog and then kill the frog. It's a part of the Catholic orthodoxy. Next, Jennifer Trujillo. Yeah, I'm done with you.
Poor frog. Okay.
Jennifer Trujillo.
Wait, Erin was not done, right?
I do want to ask about the cat. What was with the mummified cat? I didn't. I didn't like that part. That's the only thing I'm going to say I didn't like, because I love cats. So
a human man has a blowtorch up next to his face, and people are shot, and one man is stabbed to death in this film, and just. But
I'm going to do that.
Cats are innocent.
So,
Cats are
Erin,
innocent.
I'm with you, Erin. I understand why you didn't like that, and I'm happy you didn't like that, to be honest, because it is really grotesque. But I'm looking at two beautiful chartreuse cats right now sitting on my couch, and I'm absolutely a big time cat lover, dog lover, animal lover.
Nice.
The reason that cat is in the film is because I had never seen anything like that. I was walking around a barn on location, stepped on something crunchy, and I was like, "What the fuck was that?" And I looked down, and here's this perfectly mummified cat. I didn't know that was even a thing that happened to barn cats. And it looked exactly like it looks in the film when I dusted it off and picked it up out of the dirt. And I just thought it was so absolutely insane that, for one, I don't know if there's ever been one in a movie, and I knew that I had to put it in this movie. And then I started figuring out, okay, what is the symbol? What does it mean? What am I going to do with it? How am I going to write it into the script? But I just thought it was such an outstandingly wonderful, surreal, terrifying, grotesque thing that it would be a tragedy not to take that found object and put it into the film. So that's the story about the cat.
That's perfectly fair. That's a good reason.
And bedazzle it with eyes.
There you go. Why not?
So it can
goofy,
see
but
in the
it works.
afterlife. I'm sorry. Like everything else, it makes perfect sense in this script.
I enjoyed it. I mean, I got the twistedness of it, but I got everything you all just said. That's amazing.
Also, give your cat some scritches for me, please. Thank you.
I am, as we speak.
Excellent.
Erin, you're so... I love you.
Oh, thank you. I love you too.
That's
I
adorable.
love you too. I'm sure even Louise Bunnewell would learn to love you if he got to know you.
Sila, I love what you tied up in there about the mom as well. Like, well done, folks. I will ask that. I know you're busy and you have your whole life, but selfishly, I'd love you to pick another film and come back and talk to us about it. It'd be fun. How's that for a batting cleanup? It's been a delight having
Luke
you here.
Higginson did it three times.
So.
Of course. I would love to come back and talk with all of you folks. This has been a delight, and count me in. The next film that comes out, we will set up another chat and come in.
Huzzah.
Awesome.
Well, it's been an honor, and thank you folks for having me on.
Where can people find you online, Jethro?
If you want to go to myfirstandlastname.com to see any kind of films I've worked on, most of them are there. Most of the music videos and John Cale and documentaries and all kinds of different stuff is there. I'm on Instagram, Jethro Waters, Facebook, same thing. I think those are the only two things that I'm on other than my website. And if you want to find out about Gunfighter and where it's playing next and all those things, it is gunfightermovie.com. And another really fun little plug is that the poster artist for our film, who has now since passed away tragically, is the famous Renato Casaro, who painted all those famous spaghetti western posters. And he painted Conan, he painted Neverending Story, he painted Army of Darkness. The list goes on and on and on. But he watched our film 4 times and sent me a couple of sketches, and I had no notes because I was like, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. And that's who painted our poster. So we'll have special
and it
editions.
looks like a fucking progressive album cover.
Yeah, it's really
I
fun.
love the throwback energy of that.
Yeah, having a hand painted poster by that guy, the master of all movie poster masters, was a true delight for us. And there's a lot of other things that are coming. We're working with a really
we're totes stealing it for the episode artwork. I'm just warning you in advance.
Go for it. It's all yours. Steal it. We are in works right now with a really acclaimed graphic novelist artist who is really enjoyed the film. I won't name any names until we have deals signed, but there will be a series of graphic novels coming out about Gunfighter Paradise.
That's awesome.
And you're going to have limited editions of the poster? Is that where you were going with the poster art there?
Yep, we are going to have limited editions of the poster, 100%. And I will send one to this crew, of course, free of charge, because you had me on your really cool show.
Are you going to do
Erin,
like
email your address?
your direct?
We'll let you have it. Because she's got the art.
Seriously?
You got the art collection going.
Okay, thank you. Awesome.
See, I told you I love you. Just not your taste in
Birthday
movies.
present. My birthday is next Sunday. It could be a birthday
Yeah.
present. It's called
Wait, March
Wonderful people
what?
can have bad taste in movies. I don't.
Wait, when's your birthday?
March 8th.
When's your birthday? March 8th?
March
Does that
8th.
make you a Pisces?
Yes, I'm a Pisces.
Aha, fellow Pisces.
Woohoo!
March 17th.
Yeah.
There's
And
three
can
of
you
us.
say more then?
Man, okay. I'm March 19th, so we got a lot of fish swimming in the sea.
Awesome.
Mm.
We're
I
going to
won't
be
even-
artistic.
I won't even be sober from my birthday on your birthday.
Great. Keep it.
What?
Roll with it.
March
Patron?
17th. March 17th is my birthday.
Oh, no
All right.
way.
I'm gonna do a tequila toast to you on the 17th and on the 9th.
Noted.
Chin chin to all three of us. Excellent. I'm keeping that in the podcast. That way we
Jethro-
can get gifties.
Are you doing, you're going to do like Blu-ray, DVD, director's cut, all that stuff as well? Like you have a whole merch plan?
Yes, yeah, we have all that stuff. We've got my wonderful producer Kyle Lewis, who I had named earlier, who did every job on set. He's a remarkable human being. He's also a great artist. He designed the logo, and so we have T-shirts, all kinds of stickers and buttons, and we have those limited edition posters, and we will have Blu-rays coming out with all kinds of special features and people laughing in the middle of these ridiculous, insane scenes. That will all be coming in over the next year or so.
So much to look forward to. Let's do our regular social media roundup. Jennifer, where can people find you in the Gilbert Baker Film Festival online?
Gilbert Baker Film Festival.lgbt and Gilbert Baker Film Fest on Instagram. And on there, you'll find the link tree for all other socials, including the TikToks and everything else. And through that, you can find connections to me. And I would say, please reach out and connect with us, commenting on this podcast, interacting in spaces. You as the humans out there in the world, you're part of this process. You are part of why films are made, why they're discussed, and lean in, participate. So comment, talk to us, do what you can, and support your independent filmmakers. Please, that resonate with you. There you go. That was a big preach.
And Sila Blume, your website handle.
A very short preach, silablume.life. That's where I do most of my work.
And Erin Brown, where can people find you and the podcast on the internet?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy, and you can find me on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions. And you can find the podcast at ko-fi.com/world cinema history. We've got all of our episodes are up on there. We've got a place where you can comment. We got a place where you can donate and help us upgrade our equipment and keep the podcast ad-free. So please join us over there.
And that way also I can pay Erin for running the space, which currently her only payment as of now has been one poster.
Yeah, but it's a cool poster, though, so, you know.
No, it's worth it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Join us next week when we get back on the road to the Godard with an episode about Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion that Erin, Jennifer, and I recorded a month ago. And then we will be covering Jean Cocteau's Orpheus trilogy before we end the series with a Godard film which was called The End of Cinema, 1967's Weekend. If you're asking yourself what connects these films, Breathless, Gunfighter Paradise, Tuki Bookie, CSA, Black Girl, all come together as puzzle pieces in one giant puzzle. Stay tuned. All will become clear because unlike this movie, the puzzle has a solution. I'm Eric Trommater, and thank you for listening to World Cinema History.